News International on tonight's headlines. In the U.S., all eyes are in the sky tracking this Chinese balloon as there are new questions over what the Chinese are spying on. The northeastern United States and Canada are bracing themselves for an epic Arctic blast that could see some areas record their lowest ever wind chill temperatures. And President Vladimir Putin says that Russia is being threatened by German tanks again, as it was during World War II, warning that Moscow is ready to respond to aggression from the West. And the Department of Energy is optimistic that the country will be able to achieve its long-term energy goals, renewable energy goals, through the policy reforms of the Marcos administration. First, in the U.S., all eyes are in the sky tracking this Chinese balloon as there are new questions over what the Chinese are spying on. The White House says it's keeping all options on the table, and the Pentagon saying today they don't believe there are any weapons on board. And yet, this is another hit to the already strained relationship between the U.S. and China. Take a look.
While we won't get into specifics in regards to the exact location, I can tell you that the balloon continues to move eastward and is currently over the center of the continental United States. Again, we currently assess that the balloon does not present a military or physical threat to people on the ground at this time, and we'll continue to monitor and review options.
Now, the Chinese balloon is enormous, reportedly carrying a payload of cameras, and it's as big as 2 or 3 buses, powered by solar panels and steered by a rudder. The Pentagon said the first balloon was now heading eastwards over the central U.S. at an altitude of 60,000 feet. The official also said that the balloon had flown over areas that contained sensitive air bases and nuclear missiles in underground silos, but that the Pentagon did not believe it constituted a particularly dangerous intelligence threat. A senior U.S. defense official told reporters that shooting the balloon down had been considered, but that it had been decided doing so would endanger too many people on the ground. China says it's simply a balloon used for civilian meteorological purposes that lost its way. But U.S. officials just don't believe it. Let's listen in.
First of all, we are aware of the PRC's statement. However, the fact is we know that it's a surveillance balloon, and I'm not going to be able to be more specific than that. We do know that the balloon has violated U.S. airspace and international law, which is unacceptable. And so we've conveyed this directly to the PRC at multiple levels. And in terms of specific locations, I'm not going to be able to go into specific locations, again, other than to say it's moving eastward at this time. So the balloon is currently assessed to be at about 60,000 feet. So, again, well above the range of civilian air traffic, or where civilian air traffic would normally fly. Certainly aware that there are cameras, civilian-owned commercial cameras that could spot this balloon. In terms of guidance to folks, again, this is something that NORAD is closely monitoring. We do assess at this time that it does not pose a physical threat, as I mentioned, to people on the ground.
And that is the reason now why U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken canceled his visit to Beijing to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told a top Chinese official that it was irresponsible for Beijing to send a surveillance balloon over U.S. soil. Let's listen in.
China's decision to fly a surveillance balloon over the continental United States is both unacceptable and irresponsible. That's what this is about. It's a violation of our sovereignty. It's a violation of international law. We took the step that I announced earlier today in postponing the planned visit for this weekend. Meanwhile, we are going to remain engaged with the PRC as this ongoing issue is resolved. The first step is getting the surveillance asset out of our airspace.
Now, the balloon flew over the vast state of Montana, which borders Canada, and at an altitude well above commercial air traffic. The balloon flew over the Aleutian Islands in the northern Pacific Ocean and then crossed Canadian airspace into the U.S. Some lawmakers have called for the U.S. military to shoot down the balloon with F-22 fighter jets. However, the military decided against this course of action due to the risk posed by falling debris. Let's listen to some reactions.
I mean, these balloons use helium. That's why, when people talk about, shoot it down, like it's not the Hindenburg. You can't just shoot it and it goes up in flames. This is an inert gas. If you do punch holes in it, it's just kind of leak out very slowly. A lot of these balloons can operate from 65,000 feet to well over 100,000 feet, and this seems to be more like around 46,000 feet. So that's definitely a little low. And if you wanted it to be harder to spot, if you wanted it to be harder to shoot down, then it would make sense to operate at higher altitudes.
And right now, as I mentioned, we assess that it does not pose a risk to people on the ground as it currently is traversing the continental United States. And so out of an abundance of caution, cognizant of the potential impact to civilians on the ground from a debris field, right now we're going to continue to monitor and review options.
And if I may.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon also said today that a second Chinese spy balloon has been spotted over Latin America. The balloon is expected to fly over the U.S. for a few more days and then out into the ocean. Despite the canceled trip of U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken, he said he remained committed to diplomatic relations with China. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, meanwhile, said late on Friday that faced with unexpected situations, both parties need to calm down and communicate in a timely manner, avoid misjudgments, and manage differences. And now to the brutal weather settling in the northeast United States. The kind of record-shattering and dangerous deep freeze haven't seen in years. Take a look. As the coldest weather in North America descends in New England, wind chill warnings were in place across much of the area. Boston, where public schools were closed Friday, and surrounding areas are expected to receive a wind chill of minus 34 degrees Celsius. Further south, New York City is forecast to be minus 23 degrees Celsius, according to the National Weather Service. America's National Weather Service also warned that parts of Maine might see wind chills of minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 51 degrees Celsius. It said the chills are something northern and eastern Maine has not seen since similar outbreaks in 1982 and 88. Now, doctors are warning that frostbite to exposed skin can occur within 5 minutes in such conditions. The most extreme conditions are forecast to occur Friday night into Saturday morning, with extreme weather warnings in effect across Quebec and much of eastern Canada. In Montreal, the wind made the temperature feel like minus 41 degrees Celsius early Friday afternoon. The mercury was predicted to drop as low as minus 50 degrees Celsius in the northern regions of Quebec because of the strong cold gusts. White Arctic sea smoke rose over parts of the St. Lawrence River due to extreme cold winds passing over the unfrozen water. In the Canadian capital, Ottawa, a snow squall, snowfall combined with 60 to 70 km/h winds overnight Thursday to Friday reduced visibility to near zero. Now, Chile has declared a state of disaster in several central southern regions after a devastating heat wave sparked forest fires that left at least 13 people dead. More than 100 homes have been affected, 47,000 hectares of forest destroyed since the fires broke out on Wednesday. Authorities are still struggling to contain the many wildfires that had erupted, burning through more than 14,000 hectares of land across the country. The fires have been exacerbated by a nearly 13-year-long drought in the country, as well as a heat wave. 2 crew members of a helicopter that was fighting the fires died in a crash Friday afternoon, according to Chilean Venezuela's Agriculture Minister Esteban Valenzuela. The declaration of a state of disaster allows extra resources to be made available to combat an emergency. Nuble has been put on red alert alongside 7 municipalities in Biobio. The heat wave, with temperatures reaching 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit, has created fears of a repeat of the 2017 disaster in which widespread fires in the same region left 11 people dead, destroyed 1,500 homes, and affected 467,000 hectares of forest. Chile's President Gabriel Boric cut his vacation short to visit the affected areas, and he said the full force of the state will be deployed to control the blazes and assist victims. In other news, a new $2.2 billion U.S. arms package for Ukraine includes a new rocket-propelled precision bomb that could nearly double Kiev's strike range against the Russians. That, according to the Pentagon. Take a look.
Package, we will be, as part of the USAI package, we will be providing ground-launched small-diameter bombs to Ukraine. This gives them a longer-range capability, long-range fires capability, that will enable them, again, to conduct operations in defense of their country and to take back their sovereign territory in Russian-occupied areas.
Now, the ground-launched small-diameter bombs, or GLSDB, which can fly up to 150 kilometers, could threaten key Russian supply lines, arms depots, and air bases far behind the front lines. They potentially give Kiev's forces the ability to strike anywhere in the Russian-occupied Donbass, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions, as well as the northern part of occupied Crimea. However, the delivery of the GLSDB likely won't be for several months due to contracting, production, and delivery timelines, according to Pentagon spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Garen Garn, declining to say how many would be delivered. France and Italy will deliver mobile surface-to-air missile systems, the French Defense Ministry said, in response to an urgent request from Kiev to help protect civilian populations and infrastructure from Russian air attacks. The systems, called Mamba or SAMP, are a vehicle-mounted battery of medium-range missiles designed to offer protection from airborne threats such as missiles and manned or unmanned aircraft. Meanwhile, Germany said it has issued authorization for Leopard 1 tanks to be sent to Ukraine in a further boost for Kiev as it seeks heavier weapons to counter Moscow's forces. Berlin has already said it will provide Ukraine with 14 Leopard 2s from its military stocks. But manufacturers also want to send tanks they have in storage. First entering service in the 1960s, the Leopard 1 is the forerunner of the more advanced Leopard 2, which is widely used by armies across Europe. German magazine Der Spiegel reported that it's concerned 29 Leopard 1s, which were in storage at a military manufacturer. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Putin says that Russia is being threatened by German tanks again, as it was during World War II. And he warned that Moscow is ready to respond to aggression from the West. Speaking on the both anniversary of the Red Army's victory over Nazi Germany in the Battle of Stalingrad, the president compares the Third Reich invasion of the USSR to Germany's supply of Leopard tanks to Ukraine. Take a look.
Невероятно, но факт. Нам снова угрожают немецкими танками «Леопард», на борту которых кресты. И вновь собираются воевать с Россией на земле Украины руками последующих Гитлера. те, кто рассчитывает одержать над Россией победу на поле боя, видимо, не понимают, что современная война с Россией будет для них совсем другой. Мы свои танки к их границам не посылаем. Но у нас есть чем ответить. И применением бронетехники дело не закончится. Все должны это понимать.
Meanwhile, the European Union plans to slap Russia with fresh sanctions. By the anniversary of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said on a visit to Kiev. Let's listen in.
We will introduce with our G7 partners an additional price cap on Russian petroleum products. And by the 24th of February, exactly 1 year since the invasion started, we aim to have the 10th package of sanctions in place. Today, Russia is paying a heavy price as our sanctions are eroding its economy, throwing it back by a generation. The price cap on crude oil already costs Russia around 160 million euros a day. And we will keep on turning up the pressure further.
The Kremlin warned of a further imbalance to global energy markets ahead of the EU embargo on Russian oil products due to come into force this weekend. An EU-wide ban on Russian oil products such as diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel is set to come into effect on Sunday, alongside a G7 price cap on these products. The European Union, G7, and Australia have already imposed a price ceiling on Russia's oil exports. Russia has said the oil price cap will not affect its military campaign in Ukraine and, in response, banned oil sales to countries and companies that comply with the measure. In other news, 4 more years, Democrats chanting as they welcome President Joe Biden at the Democratic National Committee's convention in Philadelphia. They were rallying around the U.S. president, whose candidacy for another term is now, in their view, a foregone conclusion. Let's listen in.
I intend to get it done, more done. So let me ask you a simple question. Are you with me? For president. Well, I ran for president. Thank you. You know, as of this month, we've created 12 million new jobs. We created more new jobs in 2 years than any president did in their entire term. That's because of you. The strongest 2 years of growth in history by a long shot. 3.4% unemployment, the lowest in 54 years.
Now, the octogenarian leader is something of a rock star for activists eager to hear him speak at a plush hotel in historic Philadelphia. Already the oldest president in U.S. history, he would be 86 when the time comes to hand over the Oval Office keys, assuming he wins re-election and stays healthy. Many of his critics think that's just too old, especially since the former senator and vice president promised in 2020 to make his presidency a bridge to a younger generation. President Biden has sought to seize the political offensive after a strong midterm election season for his party, and as he looks toward 2024, with former President Trump having already announced another bid for the White House. It's especially important given mounting pressures in Washington, including a special counsel investigation into his handling of classified documents in the Republican-controlled House, eager to serve as a check against Biden and his agenda on Capitol Hill. And here's an update on the investigation and arrest of Mafia boss Mateo Messina Denaro. A girlfriend of his, Maria Messi, was jailed in the 1990s for sheltering Mateo Messina Denaro at her flat in Bagheria, Sicily. Letters were found by police showing her love for the Mafia boss, and she is now under investigation. Mia San Vicente reports from Rome, Italy.
Yesterday, the Carabinieri carried out a search in Bagheria, Sicily, at a home that in the past allegedly hosted the former super fugitive Mateo Messina Denaro to meet with the woman he was dating. Two women are alleged to have dated boss Mateo Messina Denaro in recent months. One of them spontaneously presented herself at the Campobello di Mazara Carabinieri station, reporting that she never knew the men's real identity. But there would be at least one other who had a clandestine relationship with the former fugitive. The first is said to be from Campobello di Mazara, the town where Messina Denaro lived in recent months before being arrested by the Special Operation Unit, or ROS, in Palermo on January 16th. The prosecutors coordinating the investigation, Chief Prosecutor Maurizio De Lucia and Deputy Prosecutor Paolo Guido, with the Special Operations Unit of the Carabinieri, however, are verifying the available data. Investigators, therefore, searched in Bagheria the homes of Maria Messi, former mistress of the Cosa Nostra boss, and her brother Francesco. Both appear to be under investigation on charges of aiding and abetting the Capio Mafia leaders absconding, a crime for which they had already been entered in the register of suspects in the past. At the time, Francesco Messi took a plea deal. Instead, the woman was arrested on June 14, 2000, and along with her, two other people ended up in jail, accused of being the holders of the lease for an apartment in which Messina Denaro was hiding in Aspra, Palermo. Maria Messi was convicted in first and second instance of aggravated aiding and abetting the mafia. The Supreme Court overturned the aggravating circumstance, arguing that the romantic relationship with the boss ruled out facilitating Cosa Nostra. Investigators found several love letters that the mafia boss and the woman had exchanged. Reporting from Rome, Italy, I am Mia San Vicente Abad, reminding you to stay alert because we live in extraordinary times.
Thanks, Mia. Meanwhile, Indonesia told major powers not to use Southeast Asia as a proxy for their rivalries at the start of a two-day talks between regional foreign ministers. Southeast Asia's biggest economy is the chair of the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations for this year and will later this year host the bloc's annual leaders' meetings, which are typically also joined by China and the U.S. Let's listen in.
The meeting, President Jokowi underlined two important points. First, ASEAN must not be a proxy to any side. ASEAN centrality and unity must be safeguarded and maintained as our main modality.
Disputes over the South China Sea have pitted some ASEAN members against Beijing and boosted sympathy for U.S. opposition to China's growing assertiveness, but others have shown support on issues in line with the Asian superpower. Another issue dominating talks was the crisis in military-ruled Myanmar, which has been in turmoil since the army seized power in 2021. There has been little movement on the five-point consensus agreed between ASEAN and the junta in April 2021 that called for an immediate end to violence and dialogue between the military and rebels. But President Widodo emphasized that the five-point consensus of the ASEAN leaders should be the main agreement to assist the resolution of the problems there. Let's listen in.
Just concluded the second. Indonesia has proposed, and the issue is deliberated on the implementation plan of the 5 point of consensus. Broad support was received from all members to this plan. This plan is very important for ASEAN, in particular the chair, as a guidance to address this situation in Myanmar in a united manner. It shows a strong unity of ASEAN members to implement 5 points of consensus. Colleagues, I'm happy to inform you that the ASEAN meetings in the last 2 days have been constructive, substantive, and more importantly, productive.
The junta remains an ASEAN member but has been barred from top-level summits over a lack of progress on a plan by the bloc to achieve peace between the military and Myanmar's anti-coup movement. Myanmar's Foreign Minister Tan Sui, appointed this week, was not present at the ASEAN talks on Friday, the bloc having declined to invite a junta member and only requesting a non-political representative, an offer rejected by Naypyidaw. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Ay lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Game na game si Lloyd na tanggapin ang hamon ni Attorney Ferrer. At dahil panahon na para magsaya, biyahe agad sila ng kanyang tropa. Pero ano nga bang naghihintay sa kanya sa Goodwill Resort? Mabuti na lang at super chill naman ang Goodwill Barkada. Pero na lang tong si Sarah na medyo suplada. At teka, meron pa yatang isa pang maldita. Sa wakas, nalaman na rin ni Lloyd ang lahat ng detalye ng kanyang mana. Carry ba siya sa challenge sa tulong ng Goodwill Barkada? Meron naman yatang pag-asa para sa ating bagong opa na rakista. Chill lang at rock and roll hanggang umaga. Abangan sa next episode this Sunday, 4 p.m. Ito lang sa Net25.
Talo tayo pag together, wala talo pag together, let's dance together sa Net25.
Emre, ginawa ko yan para sa ating dalawa. Para sa future natin.
Wala na tayong dalawa. Tapos na ang lahat.
Tuloy na nga bang pigo si Aileen?
Natin pakinggan mo ako.
Pero di pa nakakabawi sina Emre at Sanem kay Chan. Oras na nga ba para sa katotohanan?
Hindi mo kilala ang kapatid ko. Ayaw na ayaw niya sa mga sinungaling. Maglalaho yun. Hindi natin siya makikita. Tiwala lang. Magiging okay siya.
Sasabihin ko sa kanya lahat. Kailangan niyang malaman.
Malaman ng ano, Sanem?
Sundan sa Daydreamer. Monday to Friday, 7:30 p.m. Dito lang sa Net25.
Talo tayo pag together, wala talo pag together, let's dance together sa Net25.
Nasa panganib ang papa mo.
1, 2, 3, clear!
Dahil sa kasalanan ginawa mo.
Pilit pinagtatakpan ng katotohanan.
Dahil ayaw mo magsalita, may ibang magsasalita. Para sa'yo. Anong ginagawa mo rito?
Ipaparamdam ko sa'yo! Ang ginawa mo! At ang tunay na kriminal, itinatanggi pa rin ang kanyang kasalanan.
Ikaw, dapat rin mawala.
Fatal Promise.
Panalo tayo pag together, wala talo pag together, let's stand together. Sa Net 25.
Ang title ng ating game ay Harry Tela. Meron mga bote dito, tapos meron po tayong tela. So, bawat bote ay 1 point. So, ang gagawin, hihilahin po nila to. Ang point po, pag meron natirang nakatayo, 1 point yun. So, pinakamaraming points ang panalo, ha?
Welcome back. Dozens of disgruntled Google workers gathered outside the company buildings in New York and California this week to protest the tech giant's recent layoffs and low pay for contractors. Take a look.
I did not expect to have layoffs at Google, and I felt like a lot of my coworkers did not expect this to happen either. I think a lot of people assume because Google has so much money that we don't need to do this. And we don't need to do this, but Google has decided that they would like to follow the trend of laying people off in order to cut costs when they absolutely do not have to.
In the sense that when I joined Google in 2019, I was really happy. That sounds a bit corny, but that was almost like my dream job, or like a dream coming true. The first couple of weeks were so amazing, like going in Mountain View in California, doing the orientation, meeting everybody. That was really amazing. So even in my relatively short time at Google, which has been 4 years, I've definitely seen the working conditions get worse. I've seen definitely a lot of stress. I've seen people getting burnout. I've seen people trying to get away from our department to reach over part of the company that are known to be a bit easier to work in. And the reality is that it's kind of, I would say, people are aware of that, but it's not really talked about openly. So it's very isolating.
Now, Google CEO Sundar Pichai last month announced plans to lay off 12,000 employees in order to reverse the pandemic overhiring and focus on new areas, especially artificial intelligence. Google was caught off guard by the sudden rise of user-friendly AI such as ChatGPT, which is seen as a potential rival to Google's popular search engine. The rallies coincided with the release of fourth-quarter results showing Google parent Alphabet booked $13.62 billion in profit on $76.05 billion in revenue, numbers that fell short of Wall Street's expectations, according to a Bloomberg report. The workers said they are subjected to poverty wages and no benefits while handling tasks related to Google's AI efforts and content moderation. In other news, township residents from Soshanguven north of Pretoria were taking to the streets to vent their anger at the ongoing water shortages and electricity outages. Now, these challenges are also affecting small businesses. Take a look.
Our taps has run dry. We are not bathing. We are not like the schools. Every time the schools are going home early, now there is a lack of education because of this water. There is no water in the schools or in the clinic. We are being sent back when we are going to clinic. If we've got something, there is no water. So this is a serious problem. Hence, we are doing this. It's not a child's play. It's not. Water is life, and we've got the right to have water.
Our fridges go down. We've got insulin. We've got quite a few products that are kept in fridges. See, it has to be cooled. It has to be kept in a cool place. And with load shedding carrying on in this manner, we're losing a lot of stock as well. Continues in this way, I don't see us surviving within the next 2 years.
All Already struggling without electricity for hours a day, many South Africans are now having to do also without water as power outages batter the supply system. Provincial utility Rand Water said this week a power failure at a pump station feeding reservoirs and water towers caused taps to run dry in parts of Johannesburg and Pretoria. This further aggravated residents who for months have had to plan mundane activities such as cooking and do laundry based on a daily blackout schedule. Africa's most industrialized economy has been crippled by record power cuts in the past year as troubles at debt-laden state energy firm Eskom worsen. The utility provides about 90% of the country's electricity, but for years it has failed to keep pace with demand as it struggles to maintain its aging coal-powered infrastructure. Criminality has also contributed to the crisis, with Johannesburg's municipality saying hundreds of water tanks were stolen or vandalized last year. Meanwhile, the global economy is set to slow down this year before bouncing back next year, according to a senior official with the International Monetary Fund, citing China's sudden reopening following the end of its zero-COVID policy and a mild winter in Europe as factors. Joanne Soriano reports from New York.
The IMF announces that global growth is expected to slow from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.9% in 2023. The announcement is made at a press briefing in Singapore to mark the launch of the January update of the World Economic Outlook report.
The global economy will slow down this year before rebounding in 2024. But a global recession is not in our baseline. The important factors shaping the outlook are, on the downside, Russia's war in Ukraine and the global fight against inflation. On the upside, the reopening of China's economy. Overall, we have a mild upward revision to our projections. The global economy has shown a lot of resilience. Labor markets are tight, household spending and business investment remain strong, and European economies proved quite resilient against the energy crisis. Global growth is expected to slow from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.9% in 2023. The slowdown will be more pronounced for advanced economies. China and India will account for 50% of global growth. Global headline inflation is expected to fall from 8.8% in 2022 to 4.3% in 2024. Core inflation, however, is more persistent and remains too elevated. To sum up, barring new shocks, 2023 could be the year of turning points, with growth bottoming out and inflation decreasing.
The global economy is poised to slow this year before rebounding next year. However, the risks to the outlook remain tilted to the downside. Even if adverse risks have moderated since October and some positive factors seem more relevant.
The balance of risks to the outlook remains tilted to the downside, but is less skewed toward adverse outcomes than in the October wheel. Some upside risks have become more relevant. On the downside, China's recovery could stall with spillovers to the rest of the world. Inflation could persist at high levels, requiring even tighter monetary policy. An escalation of the war in Ukraine remains a major risk to the global economy. And a sudden repricing in financial markets could deteriorate financial conditions, especially for emerging and developing economies. On the upside, strong household balance sheets amid tight labor markets and robust wage growth could help sustain private demand. Easing of remaining supply bottlenecks, coupled with easing labor market pressures, could also allow for a soft landing with less monetary tightening.
Garincha stresses that the global economic outlook hasn't worsened, but the road back to a full recovery with sustainable growth, stable prices, and progress for all is only starting.
Well, first, the fight against inflation has started to bear fruit, but the battle is far from won. Central banks need to raise real policy rates above the neutral level and keep them there until inflation is on a sustained declining path. Central banks and prudential authorities must closely monitor the buildup of risks and vulnerabilities especially in the housing and non-bank financial sectors. Countries should also roll back the broad and untargeted support they provided households and firms to counter the cost of living crisis, and instead adopt targeted measures to conserve fiscal space, allow the energy price signal to reduce energy demand, and avoid overly stimulating the economy. More progress is also needed on orderly debt restructuring through the Group of 20's common framework. Non-Paris Club and private creditors have a crucial role to play. Supply-side policies should be used to reduce growth bottlenecks, improve resilience, alleviate price pressures, and accelerate the green transition. Finally, urgent action is needed to halt the forces of geo-economic fragmentation and strengthen multilateral cooperation in areas of common interest: international trade, the global financial safety net, public health preparedness, and the climate transition.
Joanne Soriano, New York, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, here in the country, the Department of Energy is optimistic that the Philippines will be able to achieve its long-term renewable energy goals through the policy reforms of the Marcos administration. During the Laging Handa public briefing, DOE Undersecretary Rowena Guevara said that President Marcos Jr. has been keen on implementing policy reforms that would help the country to increase the share of renewable energy in the energy mix to 35% by 2030 and to 50% by 2040. Among the initial reforms of the administration on renewable energy is allowing the full ownership for renewable energy projects. That's this and more.
Dahil po dito sa ating full 100% foreign ownership for renewable energy, sa tayak ng Department of Energy, makakaya nating ma-fulfill yung target natin na by 2040 ay 50% na tayong renewable energy. Yung mga policy na ginagawa natin, syempre dahil bago pa lang itong pagkasabi about the renewable energy investment, nakikipag-usap ang Department of Energy sa SEC para syempre dadaan sila doon at saka sa Department of Trade and Industry Board of Investments for the incentives and benefits for renewable energy companies. Ngayong nagtaas ang presyo ng oil globally, nakita natin ang epekto niyan sa mga electric bill natin, no? Nagtaasan ang ating electric bill dahil hindi tayo energy secure in terms of electricity. Pagka napadami natin ang renewable energy at nakikita naman natin na mas mababa siya kumpara kunyari sa diesel-powered electricity, bababa ang ating singil sa kuryente. Kanya nga lang, hindi kaagad naman na itatayo itong mga planta ng renewable energy. For example, yung mga solar, kaya yan ng 1 to 3 years. Pero kunyari yung offshore wind, mga 5 to 8 years bago yan maitayo. Pero ang maganda, tayo sa Pilipinas ay blessed with a lot of renewable energy potential resources. So kunyari, sa wind resources pa lang, kaya nating patakbuhin ang buong Luzon. Ma-harness lang natin. Kaya sana ang ating mga investors, both local and international, ay sana mag-invest sa renewable energy. Private sector ang nagta-drive ng energy security ng ating bansa. So we are encouraging many of our traditional partners in the generation sector to invest more in renewable energy. At kung posible nga sana mag-transition yung iba from conventional energy sources to renewable energy. Tapos, noong December, na-approve na natin yung Transmission Development Plan ng National Grid Corporation of the Philippines at nakasalang ngayon sa Energy Regulatory Commission yung tinatawag na 4th Regulatory Reset at susunod na dyan yung 5th Regulatory Reset. Pag nangyari yan, ang mga proyekto sa transmission lines ng NGCP ay nakalista na doon sa Transmission Development Plan at maaasahan na ng ating mga investors sa generation at sa distribution.
Now, earlier, the Board of Investments, or BOI, said it approved the 360 billion peso offshore wind energy project of Danish renewable energy company Copenhagen Energy AS and Petro Green Energy Corp. The administration is also setting up green lanes on strategic investments to fast-track the implementation of these projects that are expected to benefit the Filipino people. Meanwhile, briefing journalists in New York, a UN spokesperson said that according to Food and Agriculture Organization, world food commodity prices declined in January for the 10th consecutive month.
The world food commodity prices declined in January for the 10th consecutive month. The FAO Food Price Index averaged 131.2 points in January. That's 0.8% lower than the previous month. That's December of 2022. The Food and Agriculture Organization says that low domestic prices could result in small cutbacks in wheat plantings in the Russian Federation, the world's largest exporter, while severe war-induced impacts in Ukraine were estimated to reduce winter wheat area planting by about 40%.
Food prices hit an all-time high in 2022 as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in late February and the subsequent pressure on the trade in key commodities such as wheat and sunflower oil. General prices had begun to rise after the COVID pandemic between 2020 and 2021, but the annual highs of these years were still some way shy of 2022's ceiling of 125.7 points in 2021 and 143.7 in 2022. The World Health Organization said a UN-led global initiative to tackle breast cancer could save 2.5 million lives by 2040.
Each year, more than 2.3 million women are diagnosed with breast cancer, and this making it the most common cancer in the world. Breast cancer survival is 50% or less in many low and middle income countries, and greater than 90% for those able to receive the best care in high income countries.
We really cannot avoid breast cancer if we're going to address cancer in countries. It's the most common cancer among men and women together. It is the most likely reason that a woman will die of cancer globally. It is the most common cancer among women in 86% of countries, and it is the number 1 or 2 cause of cancer-related deaths in 95% of countries. So having a framework to build upon over the coming years is an essential beginning point.
Launched to coincide with World Cancer Day on February 4, the UN agency's Global Breast Cancer Initiative provides guidance to governments on early detection, timely diagnosis, and treatment. In other news, sushi conveyor belt pranks have sparked outrage in Japan. Tokyo residents are reacting to videos dubbed sushi terrorism, and it's going viral on social media, which show unhygienic pranks at sushi conveyor belt restaurants in Japan. In one viewed nearly 40 million times on Twitter, an apparently teenage customer licks the top of a communal soy sauce bottle and the rim of a teacup. He then places it back on a shelf before licking his finger and touching a piece of sushi as it goes past on the belt. Take a look.
日本人というか国民の中でもやっぱ若いものでちょっとルールが守れない変なやつもいるんだなと。で今までこう飲食店でそういうのなかったから余計ちょっと危ない世界だなっていう話でちょっと YouTuber なのかなと思ってやっぱこう YouTube でもなんか人に見られたいってやつがいるとやっぱああいうことになるのかなっていう感じですね。
悩みは別にね、最悪だなデメリットだなって思うのと日本人やっぱ海外の人にみんな来てほしいと思っているのでそうですね国のことを思わないすごいひどい人たちだなとは思いますけど。
Now, several videos dubbed sushi terrorism have emerged lately on social media, including Twitter and TikTok in recent days, some of them apparently weeks or even years old. Other videos emerged showing customers at different chains putting wasabi on passing pieces of sushi or licking the spoon in a communal green tea powder container. Though the incidents appear to be confined to just a few videos, they have caused an uproar in Japan, a country with famously high standards of cleanliness. The video, filmed at a branch of the Sushiro chain in the central Japanese city of Gifu, prompted stocks in the restaurant's parent company to plunge nearly 5% on Tuesday. Two other affected chains, the Hamasushi and Kurasushi, said they plan to take legal action, planning to install cameras above conveyor belts to monitor customers. And finally, in our news, images captured by a Japanese telescope at Hawaii's Mauna Kea Observatory shows this mysterious whirlpool in the night sky. Take a look. Now, scientists believe the flying spiral is likely related to the SpaceX recent satellite launch from Cape Canaveral in Florida earlier that day. The National Astronomical Observatory of Japan spotted the mysterious spiral through its Subaru telescope on January 18, just after SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 rocket carrying a large military satellite for the U.S. Space Force. Eiichi Tanaka, a researcher with the Subaru telescope, was busy doing other work that night and didn't notice the otherworldly shape forming in the telescope's view. This, he told The Guardian. And then someone sent him a screenshot from the YouTube live stream. On Twitter, the observatory shared an image of the cosmic whirlpool and posted a video of the spiral formation flying over the Mauna Kea and then dissipating. The launch occurred in Cape Canaveral, Florida, but satellite tracker Scott Tiley replied to the tweet, and he said that the location of the spiral over Hawaii closely matched the location of the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket at that time. That is the portion of the rocket that pushes its passenger satellite all the way to the Earth's orbit after the rocket booster, the first stage, separates and then falls back to Earth. Now, SpaceWeather.com speculated that the mystery spiral came from that Falcon 9's first stage dumping fuel as it descended. As always, I'll end the week on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.